Rain poured over the cracked highway like the heavens themselves were weeping. The wind howled through the empty gas station lot, pushing around scraps of paper and plastic cups as if mocking the loneliness that hung in the air. An old woman stood under the flickering canopy light, her thin frame trembling beneath a faded brown coat that had long lost its warmth. Her gray hair clung to her wrinkled face, and her eyes, tired, but kind, watched as a young man in a leather jacket tried to push his motorcycle down the road, its engine coughing and dying again and again. He looked angry, desperate, and soaked to the bone. She had just $10 in her purse, her last bit of money to buy bread and milk for the week, but as she saw the biker struggle, something inside her wouldn't let her turn away. Before we dive deeper into this powerful true-to-life story about compassion and the unexpected miracles it can bring, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, Kindness Corner, and share this story if it touches your heart. It helps us spread more stories that remind the world that kindness still exists, even in the smallest, most selfless acts. Her name was Margaret Lewis, though most people in town called her Maggie. At 76, she lived alone in a tiny one-room trailer on the outskirts of Greenfield, a town where everyone knew everyone, but few truly noticed her anymore. Her husband had passed 15 years ago, and her only son had moved across the country and rarely called. She survived on a modest pension that barely covered rent, utilities, and the cheapest groceries she could find. Every day, she stretched each dollar until it screamed, counting coins before she went to bed. Yet despite her hardships, she still smiled at strangers, fed stray cats that wandered near her porch, and left notes of encouragement at the bus stop for anyone who might be having a rough day. That morning had already been hard for her. The roof of her trailer had started leaking again. The power had gone out briefly during the storm. And she'd just received a notice reminding her that her gas bill was overdue. With a sigh, she'd wrapped her scarf around her neck and decided to walk to the corner gas station to pick up some essentials. That's when she saw the biker, his motorcycle tilted to one side, sputtering helplessly as he cursed under his breath. His leather jacket bore a patch that read, Steel Reapers MC, a motorcycle club known around town for their loud engines and wild gatherings. People usually crossed the street to avoid them. But Margaret didn't. She saw something in his face that reminded her of her late husband when he'd been young, angry at the world, but not evil. Just lost. She approached him cautiously, her shoes splashing through puddles. He barely noticed her at first, muttering something about being out of gas. The nearest open station was 10 miles away, and his phone battery had died. He looked up finally, his expression softening slightly when he saw her frail figure standing there, umbrella trembling in her hand. "You all right, ma'am?" he asked, his voice gruff but weary. She smiled faintly and said she was fine, but he didn't look fine. The exhaustion on his face told her he'd been on the road for hours. He admitted he hadn't eaten since the morning before and had been trying to make it home to his daughter's birthday after a long ride with his club. Margaret's eyes flicked to the $10 bill in her purse. She'd been saving it carefully. $10 wasn't much, but to her, it meant survival for a few more days. Yet something in her heart whispered, "Help him." Without hesitating, she nodded and told him to stay put. She walked into the gas station store, counted out her last bit of cash, and bought a small gas can, filling it halfway. She also bought a hot coffee and a sandwich, even though it left her with just some change. When she returned, rain dripping from her hair, she handed him the can and the food. The biker stared at her, confused. "You didn't have to do that," he said softly, but she simply smiled and told him, "Everyone needs a little kindness now and then." He took the coffee gratefully, and as she walked away, she heard him shout after her, asking for her name. "Maggie," she called over her shoulder. "Just Maggie." Then she disappeared into the storm. That night, as she returned home soaked and cold, she sat by the dim light of her old lamp and sighed. Her stomach growled, but she didn't regret what she'd done. She wrapped herself in a blanket, whispered a small prayer for the biker's safety, and drifted to sleep. She didn't know it then, but that simple act of kindness, giving away her last $10, was about to change her life forever. The next morning, she woke to a strange sound. At first, she thought it was thunder again. But as it grew louder, she realized it was the rumble of engines, many engines. She stepped out onto her small porch, shielding her eyes from the sunlight, and gasped. Down the dirt road leading to her trailer came a line of motorcycles, at least 50 of them, glistening chrome and leather shining under the morning light. The roar filled the valley, and as they stopped one by one in front of her house, the ground seemed to shake. Margaret's heart raced. She clutched her scarf tighter, unsure what was happening. Then she saw him, the same biker from the night before, stepping off his bike with a broad, grateful smile. Behind him, dozens of other riders took off their helmets, some holding flowers, others carrying boxes. The young man walked up the steps to her porch and said, "Maggie, you helped me when no one else would. You gave your last $10 to a stranger. I told my brothers about you, and we couldn't just let that go." Before she could respond, he motioned toward the others, and they began unloading boxes, groceries, warm clothes, and even a brand new refrigerator. Another man came forward with an envelope. When Margaret opened it, her hands trembled. Inside was a check for $10,000. She tried to speak, but no words came. Her eyes filled with tears as the biker explained that their club had taken up a collection overnight. They'd shared her story online, and donations poured in from bikers and strangers across the country. "You reminded us what it means to care," he said. "We wanted to return the favor." The other riders cheered as they began fixing the leaky roof of her trailer and cutting the overgrown grass around her yard. Some helped repaint her porch, while others set up a small vegetable garden out back. In a single morning, the quiet little trailer that had once felt so empty was suddenly alive, with laughter, gratitude, and roaring engines that now sounded more like a song of hope than chaos. As the sun began to set, Margaret stood among the riders, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. The biker, his name was Eli, hugged her gently and said, "Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can light up the darkest road." Those words stayed with her for the rest of her life. That night, as the last motorcycle disappeared down the road, leaving behind the echo of gratitude and friendship, Margaret looked up at the stars. She whispered a quiet thank you to the heavens, realizing that she hadn't lost her last $10, she had invested it in humanity, and the returns were infinite. From that day on, the Steel Reapers MC became her extended family. Every week, riders would stop by to check on her, bring supplies, and sit with her for coffee. Her little home became a gathering place for laughter, warmth, and love. People around town began to recognize her not as the lonely widow by the highway, but as the woman whose kindness transformed an entire community. In the end, Margaret's story became a local legend, a reminder that true generosity has no price tag, and that one small act can ripple across countless lives. When she eventually passed away a few years later, hundreds of bikers from all across the country rode together in her honor, filling the town streets with the thunder of compassion she had inspired. So if this story touched your heart today, please leave a comment below and tell us, do you believe one small act of kindness can change the world? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner, so we can keep bringing you real stories that remind us all how powerful love, empathy, and humanity can truly be. Because sometimes, all it takes is $10, and a heart brave enough to give it away.